Hey y'all, hey y'all, hey y'all! It is Friday. It's officially the weekend. That's a lot. That was a lot. I know. And I'm not sorry for it. I should be, but I'm not. Y'all know what you sign up for every time you show up on this show. So here we are. And if you're new, well, sorry, not sorry. Hashtag sorry, not sorry. Anyway, it is Friday. I hope you guys have some fun plans for this weekend. I know, I should be calmer, but I'm not, and I don't know why. And I don't know. Maybe because I know I have 9 million things to do waiting behind that veil over there. I think maybe that's what it is. I think that could be it. The real reason there's going to be a video that plays on the show today. So no, I don't know why. I think it's because fall is officially in the air. It will still be 90 something god awful degrees today, but my mornings are nice and cool right now, and I should take advantage of that and go for a, dare I say, walk. It's a good thing Walter's not on it right now. I'm not going to, just so that we're clear on this. I should, but that means I have to get up even earlier. Yeah, I'm not, and it's still dark then, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Yeah, it's still gonna be 91 degrees, 92 degrees today. Not a fan. I am a little bit bummed because we were supposed to have eye appointments tomorrow and go to Six Flags tomorrow with the kids, but everyone is kind of feeling a little weak still. The littles are feeling great. But Austin still has his little bit of a ugh, and then I know it is. You should probably go get a jacket. And then Manny feels like he's coming down with something, and it just. I think next weekend would probably be better. So we're gonna go next weekend. So I'm excited. So, but you know what we are gonna do? We're gonna do fun things. Like we're gonna bake cookies for real. And we'll probably go pick up a couple of like little pumpkins that they can paint, because it's too early to carve a pumpkin in South Texas. It's far too early for that nonsense. And I know the whole bleach thing, but listen, number one, I'm highly allergic to bleach, so that's not happening. Number two, this is still South. But look, if you bleach a pumpkin and you have deers that come up in your yard like I do, that's not a good plan. Not a good plan. It also attracts the hogs, so there's no carving pumpkins until go day. Okay, like the day, maybe 2 days before. That's as soon as you can carve a pumpkin in South Texas. I'm okay with that part. But we can paint pumpkins and we can do folly things. So we're gonna do folly things, and you know that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do folly things tomorrow. I'm excited. That's like my jam. Like that's my favorite parent jam, is doing folly things. So I'm excited about it. But I'm gonna make some. Like I said, everyone's just kind of feeling a little. Austin's trying to get over his cold. He's had it for like 2 weeks. Manny feels like he's starting to get a cold. The littles are feeling better now. And I told them, I was like, y'all should just make some chicken noodle soup. But I was out of town, and they all were just like, we don't make it as good as you do. And I'm like, that's a fact. I mean, nobody makes it as good as I do, but you could have tried. And they didn't. They were quitters. So I'm gonna make some chicken noodle soup, maybe some homemade bread. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how crazy I get. I think I told you guys about my sourdough starter kit that I failed miserably at because I wasn't here. And so now I've got to redo it, and I haven't had 15 seconds to redo it. That's my biggest problem. So I'm gonna redo it. That'll be one of the things on the slate of to do things this week, and so that next weekend I can make a nice crusty sourdough bread. How yummy will that be? Great. Everyone will be happy. Happy, happy, happy. Anyway, I have a fresh cup of pumpkin spice creamered coffee right now, and that's where I'm at. Okay. We need to have a serious conversation, and I wanted to pull up a clip for this serious conversation, and I didn't have an opportunity to. So I'm going to see if we can do it right now, because if you don't know who it is, what the reference point is, it's not going to be as funny. It just, those are the facts of life. What's blasphemy about sourdough? Sourdough is amazing. Is it because you make it and you're nowhere near me? Okay, that's cool. Okay, this should be a sufficient enough clip. Please know that this is an unvetted clip, but it will give you an idea. So have you ever seen Boss Baby? Right? You remember Boss Baby? Alec Baldwin was the boss, and he really isn't a baby. He's like a mega boss from Baby Core and all the whole thing, right? Well, they made a second movie. Okay, they made a second movie. It's endearing, it's fun, all of the things. I'm gonna play you this clip, and I really feel like Walter should be here because we're just gonna end up having to repeat it if he's not paying attention. So Walter, I don't know what you're doing right now that's more important than right now, but you best just get off your little skibbity pap and get over here. Okay, so I'm gonna play this clip so that you know the reference point. Okay, are we all there? Simon, are we good? Okay, keep the haters out of the comments. Here we go. This should be a good enough reference.
And too late. That dog. Pets aren't allowed in school. You, my pudgy protege.
No, move!
I offered you the world. We could have been partners.
I've got something better than a partner.
I have a brother.
Yeah. Let go. No, you let go.
Wow. Point taken. What's going on? Hey, that's my leisure suit.
It looks better on her. Hands up, diapers down.
Okay, so you get the point, right? He's a bad guy. He's a bad guy from a kid's movie. Okay. Are you ready, America? So yesterday, was it yesterday? It was either yesterday or the day before. My sister and I were talking. Now you probably don't believe that, but my sister and I were talking, and she starts giggling in spite of herself. I mean, she's just like full-fledged cracking up. Okay. Wait, hold on. Okay. She is full-fledged cracking up. And she's like, Sandra, I figured out who Tim Walz looks like. And I was like, okay, who? She goes, have you seen Boss Baby 2? And I was like, yeah, of course. And she's like, he's the evil villain. And I'm like, shut up. And then she sends me these two pictures. What are you supposed to do? Tim Walz is a seemingly nice guy. But he's not. He's really mean. This is not the greatest thing you've ever seen. Walter, did you see any of that? Please say yes.
Nope, didn't see a thing.
You make me so angry sometimes.
We'll play it
Tim
again.
Walz is the evil villain from Boss Baby 2.
Oh, I thought that was Miss Piggy.
That doesn't look anything like Miss Piggy, you jackwagon. You ruin everything.
I literally I wasn't even expected to be jumped on this quickly.
I know, which is why I had to throw you up there so that you could see this.
Sandra, thank you for throwing me up.
You're welcome. Any chance I can.
I am showered. I just stole 3 rolls of toilet paper. So
I'm proud of you for both.
I am still eastbound and down. And my next stop,
north.
My next stop is no, I'm literally eastbound and down. My next stop will be I was supposed to go through San Antonio last night, but that didn't happen because we didn't get out of our critical meetings until whatever time. And then I was made aware that on Monday I have a meeting. I'm like, nope, I'm not working next week. So that was pretty funny. So anyway, now there was I got to be with Miss Tammy Smith last night. So my
You did. I seen it.
We traded some signs. I got some Ted Cruz signs put up. You know, I would have been at the heart of the San Antonio Republicans, but leaving out of El Paso, New Mexico area was not on the books for anything that it should have been. So anyway.
Sometimes it be like that, yo.
I
Honestly, nobody in
what
the
I got.
state travels more than you do, especially to try and further the cause of the Republican Party. So they can eat it.
Well, these are all, you know, I know where I'm headed, so I make things happen in between there. So I multitask. How's that?
You do.
I'm
You do.
like a political Uber. How's that sound?
Like a political what?
A political Uber.
Oh, Uber. That's not what I heard. So I'm glad that you. Did you and Miss Tammy Smith?
Yeah. Hey, she's got some
I
fun
like
banners
this.
around that town. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was good stuff.
Got some Ted Cruz signs, so little Mr. Williams should be happy. Let's hope Teddy can make it happen. I'm hoping there's not going to be an empty bus tour this time. I'm hoping he's actually going to be on it.
If he actually does one, but here we all are. We'll never know about William Little because he doesn't return phone calls to people who actually do the thing because he's William Little.
We're Facebook friends now, so we're cool.
Ooh, lucky you.
Oh yeah, look at me. No, we've been looking at what's going on over there at Lake Lure, the North Carolina lake that the dam overflowed. So apparently the dam held. The dam was built over 100 years ago. Guess what that whole area is significant for?
I give up what?
The movie The Last of the Mohicans. That's one. And then there's another movie you might possibly know about it. It's called Dirty Dancing.
No kidding. I didn't realize that was there. Maybe I did know that, but I didn't think about it. I think I did know that it was filmed in North Carolina.
Yeah, so there's just total devastation down on I think it's Highway 74. But anyway, the lake is a town-owned lake, so it's not owned by the Army Corps of Engineers. The people are only getting $750. FEMA is upset that all these volunteers are stepping in. There is some, apparently there's some issue whether or not FEMA came in and said we're gonna take your town. That they can't take your town or your land. They have to give you money for it, eminent domain, and I don't think that's going to happen. But all these conspiracy theories right now are pretty comical. So the situation is definitely bad. The conspiracy theories may not be as bad as they're sounding right now. It may not be as bad as it sounds. But anyway, I've talked to some people there. Our company does a lot of disaster relief and disaster work. So while we've been working on the border and getting things done in the oil and gas sector, hurricane cleanup is one of our huge things that we've done for past years.
I put this up really quick. You sent this to me. John Boucher had it on his Facebook page also. This is a disaster relief it's a drive for Tennessee and North Carolina. These are some physical goods that are needed that even if the Red Cross and things like that do not participate in making sure provided. We've talked about this before. Diapers are one of them. Adult sanitary napkins are another one. Female products, formula, simple things like that you would think would be at the top of the list because those are critical infrastructure items are not. So this is here. There's also a QR code if you can't physically give items, if you can't make it up there, if you want to be able to still give and help out, this is one. There are other organizations, but I saw this. Of course, we still have our friends up in MoCo, so they're doing great things up there. And we'll keep you guys posted on what's going on and how you can help in ways that we find. Samaritan's Purse is also another really good one that you can give to that goes directly to it. And of course, Samaritan's Purse is right there in North Carolina, so they are hands-on to say the least.
Don't forget the United Cajun Navy. I dealt with them firsthand and personally back in during Hurricane Harvey and during that relief and whatnot. And of course, MoCo, that's the best part there. The Montgomery County Tea Party and a lot of the folks in Montgomery County, we were heavily affected by Hurricane Harvey. Obviously Houston and the surrounding area, but At that time in 2017, we were driving all over this state picking things up. We had, the Ernest Bales is someone that a lot of folks they don't like now because of his stance with Dade Phelan, but he was actually transporting drugs via his airplane to nursing homes. He was picking up from doctors up north and pharmacies and bringing down to nursing homes. We had, I remember Jim Napolitano, and we had a whole bunch of private investors that had their own military equipment. And we had one guy that had a Hemet that had a jet ski that could come off of the arm. And so it was pretty slick stuff. And, so we had law enforcement that was with us. And that was the key there. Obviously, Harvey was really, really bad because once it went back out in the Gulf, regenerated, came back up through the Houston area and just obliterated it. So, those are things they know. And these, at that time, there was actually, prior to the 2018 elections, I mean, it was just everybody loved on each other, hugged on each other. So as Americans, as Texans, we all came together. And so a lot of these people literally physically have scars for being without electricity for weeks upon weeks and months upon months. Our good friend Kathy, she was huge. She was ill with probably not cancer at that time, but she was one of the big stalwarts that I'll never forget her without her makeup on, running all over Montgomery County just to help out. Bob Bagley and Dale Inman and those guys there. As a matter of fact, Dale Inman is headed to Monday, I think, is when he's leaving. He's there taking two trailer trucks of equipment. And, Dale has always been a very kind-hearted rescuer. He's been the man of the rescue, and I don't think he knows this or not. But the town of Inman is just south of all of this. I don't know if they were affected or not, but I'm not sure. I think it's in South Carolina. I may be wrong, but it's off of Interstate 26 somewhere over there. So there's some fun, and I talked to several friends that are over there. Our company was stood down on the hurricane stuff for now because FEMA has no money, and Mayorkas literally comes through and says we don't have and people don't realize this is the beginning of the 2025 fiscal year. Started a couple days ago,
Yep.
And the federal government is out of money. So hey, folks, this is what you get. Sorry. And for those folks over there, this is not political. This is where knowing what your government is supposed to do makes sense, makes a difference. And I've talked to several folks that are on they're on major businesses. One gentleman I talked to last night, they're accepting movers into South Carolina today. They drove through the storm. Good friend of mine, her and her husband drove through the storm. And he was like, Walt, back in 2001, whenever the World Trade Center was hit, and then also again, whenever Superstorm Sandy was hit, they had the business he had spent all of the, about $1 billion they spent on, they saved that money so they didn't have it lying in wait. And when it came time to use it, and I'm sorry, it's Superstorm Sandy in 2012, their business had nothing to go to. And he said, yeah, we had 3 stories of water in the bottom of the trade center area. So, because they have stuff that goes down as well. And, that just goes to show you when you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. And and I'm not going to go to the Biden-Harris administration directly. I mean, that is one of my purposes, yes. But at the same time, our bureaucrats that have been in there for 30 and 40 years, they have failed. And the elected officials are trying to be the ones to solve the problem. And it's not going to happen until we the people get involved.
Well, this is a problem that we have seen for decades, right? The whole budget concept, and we've talked about this on the show multiple times. It doesn't make any sense. Hey, you've got a surplus of money, you better hurry up and spend it, or you're not going to get any next year. Well, because of this mentality, exactly what you're saying, now we have a big problem. And I'm going to pull this article up. I put it in the links. I shared it on my social media on Sandra for Texas, on Texas Fully Loaded on Facebook. it specifically talks about the title of the article is FEMA running out of hurricane relief money while spending hundreds of millions on migrants. And when I shared it,
Billions.
my caption was, but Americans aren't being affected by an open border.
Billions.
Yeah. And so we're seeing it goes to the same mentality, right? There's no reason that we as Americans can't just give money to these people and blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what? Look, we spent all of this money on all of these people, and now we have serious, unexpected, widespread problems from this storm that ended up being way worse than anyone predicted. And yeah, this is on the backs of every single illegal that's taking government money. This is on the backs of every single person that has that Alejandro Mayorkas and Harris and Biden's and all of them have said, hey, but the problem is that this FEMA relief money has been in place for these illegals for a long time. So how many other times have American citizens not been given what they needed because they're too busy with some sort of propaganda piece?
Well, and you need to look at the fact that Mayorkas, we couldn't impeach him. But now look at where we're at. He is single-handedly in charge of the TSA, FEMA, CBP, the Capitol Police, Secret Service. Every major governmental issue that we have had in just this past year alone lies on the back of one Cuban communist that has a soft tell story that came to America and lived the American dream. And if somebody check me on this one, Mayorkas worked for Obama and was in the similar role. Was he in charge during Superstorm Sandy? Remember the last CBP? Yeah. I mean, you know how my mind works. It was just like, wait a second. So, and we had the whole Hurricane Ike. We had which was 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. Or Hurricane Ike was 2008. Either way, we had a bad one in 2012 down in the Houston area. And of course, Superstorm Sandy was 2012. I know that immensely. We were largely integral there. They were anyway. Yeah, that was a freeze your butt off situation.
Let's see if we can find that information before we move on. But to see this stuff kind of moving back around, and here's the number on Superstorm Sandy, by the way. $65 billion in property damage. More 160 people were killed also. So we're already at a higher death toll with Helene than we were with Superstorm Sandy. Let's see.
Yeah,
here.
and you're gonna find they're talking about the bodies and everything. I think there's more TikTok hype on that than need be. There's people with their own, they're hearing things because a lot of the stuff I'm hearing is repetition, and you just go somewhere else and check into it, and it's it goes against logic anyway. Even a dictatorship's not going to be this bad, but.
So yeah, but I wonder, and I'll throw this up just so people can see where I saw it. This is directly off the DHS website. It doesn't say who the director was. I'll have to do a little bit more digging than a 5-second thing here on the show. But
just Google Mayorkas. It'll be in his public whatever. He was a prosecutor.
I'm not going to do it right this second. Let's talk about some other stuff with it. But we'll
yeah. So let's get on to the meat of the matter that we were really going to hit.
Yes.
Are you still fixing to put up that video?
I am. And just as an FYI, America, it is an hour and 56 minutes long. So y'all are going to lose about 25 minutes of it because we're just not going to.
Dadgummit, it's on YouTube too. And this right here is from April of 2024, and it's buried. It's, for me, I got to watch it off of Forbes, which finally put it up. But at the same time, I'm like, You know, this is what Americans are not paying attention to. This actually is a truth. And because you didn't, it's there, so it's a truth. But because you didn't see it then, you didn't make the hype and it went away. That being said, that means that there's a lot of January 6th information, that propaganda that's still being put out by the left and some by the right, that this right here directly contradicts facts of that. Well, directly contradicts items that were brought up in the Jan 6 cases, specifically with the commission and the committee report. These are physical eyewitnesses that participated, that were never, their testimony and their information was never made public. And these are the actual men of the DC National Guard, and this is their story.
Right. No, this is really good, hard-hitting stuff, guys. I'm going to do my best to be Johnny on the spot with the commercial thing. I know it gets a little bit cumbersome sometimes, but we hope that you guys have a great weekend. This is going to lead us into this will be our parting day. So we'll see you guys next week.
Members of the subcommittee, and our courageous whistleblower for joining us for today's oversight hearing. These whistleblowers are coming forward today to share for the first time under oath their firsthand account related to National Guard deployment on January 6th. None of today's whistleblowers were interviewed under oath by the Department of Defense Inspector General or the Select Committee. January 6, 2021 highlighted a culmination of failures at many levels. For today's hearing, we're examining the Department of Defense and the DC National Guard's response to the violent breach of the Capitol. So we'll get into it. I'd like to play a brief video about the time frame of the delay.
Is this the video we received just this morning? Last night, okay.
Drive 50 miles east of Silicon Valley, California, and you will see beautiful multi-million-dollar homes.
I want to thank the minority for their indulgence in playing the video. I think it's important to kind of set the stage of just how important 3 hours and 19 minutes can be on a day like that. At a previous hearing, we heard testimony from former U.S. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund about the former Speaker and the congressional leadership delay of the U.S. Capitol Police's request for assistance. On January 6, 2021, at 1:49 p.m., the DC National Guard received the first request for immediate assistance from the U.S. Capitol Police as protesters started to gather and force their way into the Capitol complex. However, at this time, the Capitol Police Board had not officially approved the request. At roughly 2:12 p.m., protesters breached the Capitol and began assaulting police officers. Staffers and members of Congress were ordered to evacuate, including myself and others that are here today. Capitol Police attempted to secure members and clear the Capitol, but were quickly outnumbered. There have been many testimonies of that day, but one thing is clear: the U.S. Capitol Police requested and needed urgent assistance from anyone who would answer the call, including the Metropolitan Police Department and various federal law enforcement entities and the DC National Guard. However, there was a delay deploying the National Guard for over 3 hours. Almost an hour after the Capitol was breached at 3:04 p.m., the Acting Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller, approved the D.C. National Guard to deploy to the Capitol. Just a brief history lesson for those who do not know. Executive Order 11485 delegates oversight of the D.C. National Guard to the Department of Defense. A 1969 memo further designates this authority specifically to the Secretary of Army. On January 6, 2021, the commanding general of the D.C. National Guard, William Walker, reported directly to the Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy. The D.C. National Guard was at the Armory, 1.2 miles away from the Capitol, waiting for authorization to deploy to assist civil authorities and quell the riot. However, the D.C. National Guard didn't arrive at the Capitol until almost 6 p.m. That's 3 hours and 19 minutes of delay. During those hours, chaos engulfed members of Congress, law enforcement officers, reporters, staffers, and citizens. During those hours, necessary help from the D.C. National Guard was not on the way. Our goal today is to get to the bottom as to why. It took too long for the D.C. National Guard to arrive at the Capitol. The 113th Wing Capitol Guardians have a proud history of protecting our nation's Capitol and serving our nation's leadership. Nevertheless, the New Jersey State Police from nearly 150 miles away responded to the Capitol before the D.C. National Guard. Additionally, the Pentagon knew that there was a threat to governmental operations because by 3:37 p.m., the Pentagon sent its own security forces to guard the homes of defense leaders. At 3:37 p.m., no D.C. National Guard forces were on the way to the Capitol. Throughout my subcommittee's extensive investigation into the events of January 6 and the Select Committee on January 6, we have uncovered concerning inconsistencies regarding the mobilization of the D.C. National Guard. Through phone records, firsthand accounts, sworn testimonies, and after-action reports we have gathered, there appears to have been a significant delay at the Department of Defense in either deploying the National Guard or communicating the order of deployment. Either way, the purpose of this hearing is to hear the D.C. National Guard story for the first time ever about the 3-hour and 19-minute delay. On November 16, 2021, the Department of Defense Inspector General released a report reviewing their role in the response to January 6, which claimed that the D.C. National Guard was deployed to the Capitol as quickly as possible. However, the report also credited significant delays in deployment to D.C. National Guard Commanding General Major General William Walker, neglecting to mobilize after receiving orders. Specifically, the DoD-IG report concludes that the leader of the National Guard response, Major General Walker, received direction from the Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy, to deploy the D.C. National Guard to the Capitol twice, once at 4:35 p.m. and again at 5 p.m. Major General Walker denies that either of these calls took place. Despite the many inconsistencies and contradictions of the Department of Defense's responsibility that day, the Select Committee on January 6 ignored these discrepancies despite them being shared privately by their own staff and barreled forward with the DoD's side of the story. Following the release of the DoD-IG report, multiple whistleblowers from the D.C. National Guard who were present with Major General Walker have come forward to share their experiences. According to their testimony, hours of vital response time were missed because senior Army officials had personal concerns regarding military presence at the U.S. Capitol. Today, we have the responsibility of recognizing these D.C. National Guardsmen, listening to their testimony, and honoring their patriotism. These brave men who showed up to defend the Capitol and were discarded and ignored when they tried to come forward. I reached out to the DoD-IG regarding concerns with their report and contradictory narratives. For nearly 2 months, I have not received any answers. Today, we will learn more about what happened that day regarding the delay. We'll hear a side of the story that has been ignored for too long. Most importantly, today, we will look into the future and make sure that our Capitol guardians, and our law enforcement partners are more prepared today than they were 3 years ago. We're only able to conduct this oversight because whistleblowers have come forward to share their stories. I encourage anyone to reach out to the subcommittee as our investigation continues. I now recognize the ranking member, Ms. Torres, for 5 minutes for the purpose of providing an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today and for your service to our nation, particularly on January 6th. You sacrificed your time to protect us, and we owe you a debt of gratitude. We are here today discussing the delayed National Guard response to the Capitol for one reason, and one reason only: Donald Trump dispatched an armed mob to try to overturn the election he knew he lost. And for 3 hours and 19 minutes, as that violent mob assaulted law enforcement and hunted for members of Congress and the vice president who they were trying to hang, the National Guard was forced to wait and wait and wait. All because of the chaos at the Pentagon caused by the commander-in-chief and the fear that he would involve the military in domestic political affairs, a big no-no we teach worldwide to emerging countries. This was a commander-in-chief who, as the riot unfolded, didn't call his acting Secretary of Defense or Secretary of the Army to ask why the National Guard was missing. Where were they? A commander-in-chief who, after he learned someone was shot, didn't care. He didn't call the National Guard directly. A commander-in-chief whose aides and family partied and danced as the mob prepared to overturn the Capitol. A commander-in-chief who sat in his dining room watching it all unfold on TV like it was an action movie with an ending favorable to him. How did we get here? Let me tell you. In response to the June 2020 demonstrations responding to the murder of George Floyd, President Trump said he would, quote, deploy the United States military, end quote, to put down the protest, and even asked Secretary of Defense Mark Esper why the military couldn't just, quote, shoot the protesters in the legs or something, end quote. Secretary Esper found the president's comments so disturbing, he held a press conference saying he opposed invoking the Insurrection Act. Then, in December, as Trump continued to spread conspiracy theories supported by members of this Congress sitting here today about the election being stolen, talk of invoking the Insurrection Act reached a boiling point.
Amazon hates this, but there's nothing they can do to stop it. There's a new electric lighter out there, and it's got the firepower of...
It got so bad that his own Secretary of the Army and the Army Chief of Staff, a 4-star general, issue a joint statement saying, quote, there is no role for the U.S. military in determining the outcome of an American election, end quote. And as our top military leaders worry the president will declare martial law, the rest of the national security apparatus was in total disarray. People were getting fired or resigning left and right. Everyone remembers that, right? And with only 71 days left in his term, Trump terminated the Secretary of Defense and replaced him with an acting Secretary of Defense who was completely over his head. Contrary to attempts to rewrite history, the January 6th Select Committee conducted more than 24 interviews and reviewed over 37,000 pages of documents related to the National Guard and dedicated 46 pages of its final report to this issue. The Select Committee found that the chaos led to an ill-equipped acting Secretary of Defense issuing an unclear order to the Secretary of the Army, an order so unclear that it was interpreted differently by the acting Secretary of Defense, the Army Chief of Staff, and the Secretary of the Army. 3 people, 3 different interpretations. It's all there in the Select Committee's final report and the dozens of relevant transcripts available online. Adding to the chaos, these top Army officials exercised extreme caution and imposed unprecedented restrictions on when and how to deploy the Guard on January 6th. This was the direct result of the president's decision to involve the military in domestic affairs. To our witnesses, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that Trump's Defense Department and Army leadership failed you and they failed us on January 6th. You should never have been forced to sit on your hands while we were lying on our stomachs, planning to use a pen in our purses as a weapon to defend ourselves against the mob that was sent here to kill us by the President of the United States of America. We were preparing to die. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. Chair now recognizes the full committee ranking member, Mr. Morelli, for 5 minutes for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for your careers of distinguished service. The DC National Guardsmen are known as the Capitol Guardians, and we as members are only able to do our jobs in the days and months that followed January 6th because you stood guard over us as you did, and for that and for all of your long service, we owe you an enormous debt of gratitude. So thank you. I want to be clear. We're here today for a single reason. An unpatriotic, cynical, power-hungry man incited a deadly insurrection as part of his months-long effort to overturn a free and fair American election. We're here because of his lies about the 2020 election. It's hard to believe. It's frankly even hard to say, but it doesn't make it any less true. Yet many cannot bring themselves to acknowledge it, many in this room. As a result, we're here because of the majority's 15-month quixotic mission to find malfeasance from the January 6th Select Committee who investigated the insurrection where no malfeasance exists. And frankly, just as a question of jurisdiction should be raised, if this hearing is about the chain of command and or communication between the various elements of the defense apparatus of the United States, then it falls to the House Armed Services Committee to do that investigation. They should be doing it, I do agree, but this is clearly not the venue for this to happen. I do want to address something at the outset. There is a notion that persists that President Trump ordered or pushed for 10,000 National Guard troops ahead of January 6th. It's been debunked repeatedly, and it's also a red herring, and here's why. As the chair has stated, a 1969 executive order delegated authority of the DC National Guard to the Secretary of Defense, who in turn delegated that authority to the Secretary of the Army. But the President of the United States ultimately sits atop the chain of command. What he did with the National Guard before January 6th doesn't matter compared to his actions, or I should say inactions, on the 6th of January itself. And what he never did on the 6th was call the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Army, or the DC National Guard itself to find out why they were not on the scene or to order them to the Capitol for that 3-hour and 19-minute delay. So I want to quickly dispense with the claim once and for all that he'd ordered 10,000 troops, as he has said. Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller was asked the following questions and provided the following answers under penalty of perjury. First question, the 10,000 troops, did you take that as a request for you or an order for you to deploy 10,000 troops? His answer, and I quote, no, absolutely not. I interpret it as a bit of presidential banner or President Trump banner that you're all familiar with, and in no way, shape, or form did I interpret that as an order or direction. He was also asked, in February of 2021, Mark Meadows said on Fox News that, quote, even in January, that was a given as many as 10,000 National Guard troops were told to be on the ready by the Secretary of Defense. Is there any accuracy to that statement? Mr. Meadows' answer, not from my perspective. I was never given any direction or order or knew of any plans of that nature. So no, there was obviously, we had plans for activating more folks, but that was not anything more than contingency planning. And then a few questions later, to be crystal clear, the question was, there was no direct order from President Trump to put 10,000 troops to be on the ready for January 6th. Is that correct? His answer, quote, that's correct. There was no direct order. There was no order from the president. I think that's all you need to know. Under oath, the Secretary of Defense said it never happened. Here's the bottom line. The President of the United States manipulated his followers into believing the election was stolen from him, summoned an armed mob to Washington, and then unleashed them on the United States Capitol, and then did absolutely nothing to stop what unfolded. People died. we almost lost our democracy. We could have 100 hearings to deflect blame, but the facts are not going to change. President Truman famously had a sign on his desk that said, "The buck stops here." President Trump's sign, on the other hand, would read, "The buck stops anywhere but here." He lit the fire, he fanned the flames, the Defense Department delayed the troops, and he wants everyone else to take the blame. Frankly, I find it pathetic. I agree with Senator Mitch McConnell, who said former President Trump's actions preceding the riot were a disgraceful dereliction of duty. Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy said Trump bears responsibility for his actions, no ifs, ands, or buts. And I agree with Senator Lindsey Graham, who said, "All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough." I only wish that they and the rest of the Republican Party agreed with their prior versions of themselves. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Just for the record, this hearing is not being done in isolation. It's been carefully coordinated with the House Armed Services Committee, and not only has their blessing, but a bipartisan blessing to hold this hearing. Also, without objection, I'd like to submit for the record Secretary Miller's transcribed interview under oath to the Select Committee on January 6th. 2 excerpts. So, Mr. Miller, did you try to reach, well, let me back up. On January 3rd, did you have, or even prior, did you have all the authorities needed in terms of activating, deploying the DC National Guard? And he said, yes, I felt I did. Did you need any additional authorities, or was there a discussion about your authorities in any way at the January 3rd meeting? No, I didn't. I felt like I had all the authorities I needed and did not need to discuss anything with the president regarding authorities. Another question. So, Mr. Miller, did you try to reach President Trump that day? I did not. Why not? I had all the authorities I needed to perform my duties, responsibilities that day, and didn't need any other guidance from the president. I now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
And let me start, Mr. Chairman, by submitting for the record the Army timeline of events from December 31st, 2020 through January 7, 2021. That report dated January 7, 2021.
Without objection.
I find some of the comments this morning interesting because I too was on the floor that day. And I find it interesting because there's an allegation that the commander-in-chief has to call everybody who's in the chain of command to make sure his orders are followed. It is my understanding, and I believe that the evidence today will show from these gentlemen who have given their time and are whistleblowers, meaning they're coming forward with something that other people may not want to have heard, that we will discover through their testimony that in fact, the president had given the instruction, perhaps misunderstood on January 3rd, but certainly on January 6th, prior to that instruction being relayed by his officers in accordance with the general military procedure to the DC National Guard. And that's a big part of what this hearing will be about today. And I think it's important that we keep that in mind. Further, we've heard a lot about the attempts to rewrite history because the January 6th committee is allegedly supposed to have already done all of this. But we will hear, I believe, from these gentlemen today that they were not talked to by the January 6th commission. And further, that commission will forever in history be tainted because it was the first time in history, in an attempt to write the history after the fact, that both sides, both major parties in this political situation that we have found ourselves in for the last 175, 200 years, both were not invited to participate in an equal manner. That the Republican representatives who were supposed to be on that, who was originally set up, were supposed to be a part of the January 6th committee, were not allowed to be present. They were not allowed to cross-examine witnesses. They were not allowed to ask for witnesses like these 4 brave gentlemen who are here with us today. They weren't allowed to call those witnesses to appear in front of the January 6th committee. So while the January 6th committee may have found some very interesting information, they intentionally chose not to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. At the very best, it can be described as a partial attempt to put forward facts that favored their side of the narrative and not to get to all the facts. And as Jack Webb and his famous character from Dragnet used to say, the facts. We just want the facts, ma'am. That's what we're here to do today, is to try to make sure that we're getting to the facts, not the political rhetoric, not the emotions per se, but the facts from four brave gentlemen who serve our nation and have served our nation, who have come forward. I don't know any of these gentlemen. I don't believe any of them has a political axe to grind. They are here just to deliver the facts. Yield back.
The gentleman yields. Without objection, all other members' opening statements will be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted to the committee clerk by 5 p.m. today. Pursuant to paragraph B of Committee Rule 6, the witnesses will please stand and raise your right hand.
Absolutely. Why did dogs live longer in the 1970s?
Back in the 1970s, a golden retriever's average lifespan was
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show the witnesses have answered in the affirmative, and you may be seated. I will now introduce each of our witnesses. Our first witness is Command Sergeant Major Michael Brooks. Command Sergeant Major Brooks' military career spanned 29 years with combat tours in Iraq. Command Master Sergeant Brooks spent the end of his career in the D.C. National Guard, including at the Joint Task Force D.C. Mr. Brooks now works at a company that seeks to protect national and economic security from undue foreign influence. On January 6, 2021, Mr. Brooks was a senior enlisted advisor to Major General William Walker and advised on all enlisted matters. Our next witness is Colonel Earl Matthews, a decorated military veteran with a long and accomplished career in government and the private sector. Colonel Matthews served as Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Defense Policy and Strategy on the National Security Council staff. He also served as the Army's acting General Counsel and Principal Deputy General Counsel, as well as the Deputy Legal Counsel to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. On January 6, 2021, Colonel Matthews was the Chief Legal Advisor to Major General William Walker and was with him all day. Our next witness is Brigadier General Aaron Dean, with a similarly accomplished career in military service. Brigadier General Dean served in Operation Desert Storm and a combat tour in Iraq. He also served in the D.C. National Guard for over 35 years, exemplifying what it means to be a Capitol Guardsman. On January 6, 2021, Brigadier General Dean served as Major General Walker's Adjutant General and Principal Advisor. Our final witness is Captain Timothy Nick, an active duty service member in the Florida National Guard. Captain Nick has experience in law enforcement, including as a current officer in the U.S. Secret Service. Captain Nick previously served in the D.C. National Guard's Public Affairs Department. On January 6, 2021, Captain Nick was the aide-de-camp to Major General William Walker and took detailed notes of actions of Major General Walker on that day. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service to our country and your strength and courage to come forward and share your accounting of events on January 6, 2021. We all look forward to your testimony. As a reminder, we have read your written statements, and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Under Committee Rule 9, you are to limit your oral presentation to a brief summary of your written statement, unless I extend the time period in consultation with Ranking Member Torres. Please remember to turn on your microphone using the button in front of you so that members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light on the timer in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes has expired, and we just ask that you please wrap up your comments at that moment. I now recognize Command Sergeant Major Michael Brooks for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Loudermilk, Ranking Member Torres, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am Command Sergeant Major Retired Michael F. Brooks. I am the former Command Senior Enlisted
Mr. Brooks, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you pull the microphone a little closer to you? People in the audience are having a hard time hearing. I apologize for that. You can start over and we'll reset your time.
Thank you. Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Chairman Loudermilk, Ranking Member Torres, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am Command Sergeant Major Retired Michael F. Brooks. I am the former Command Senior Enlisted Leader of the District of Columbia National Guard, the Capitol Guardians. I retired on March 1st of 2023 with 29 years of active federal service in the Army and the Army National Guard. While I am no longer in service, I continue defense of our great nation as a compliance and investigation specialist with the Compliance and Adjudication Division of the Office of Information and Communications Technology and Services of the Bureau of Industry and Security. I served as the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of the DC National Guard from December 2017 to December of 2022. As the most senior non-commissioned officer in the organization, I reported directly to Commanding General, and from 2017 until his retirement and selection as the 38th Sergeant at Arms for the House of Representatives, my commander was Major General William J. Walker. As his senior enlisted advisor, I reported only to him, and I was with him throughout the days before, the day of, and the subsequent weeks and months that followed the events of January 6, 2021. So imagine my surprise when the DODIG released their report without once interviewing myself or other critically significant DC National Guard members with firsthand knowledge of what occurred that fateful day. Not anonymous witnesses or anonymous officials, but senior ranking military members that were in the room, on the calls, and on the secure video teleconference. I'm not here to disparage the Army that I love and served for nearly 3 decades, but to correct the record and speak for the hundreds of enlisted soldiers and airmen of the DC National Guard who have always answered the call to serve without political bias or prejudice, who have always faithfully fulfilled their oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Those Capitol Guardians who continue to do so even today after being degraded by senior officials of the Army and the Army staff in their inaccurate and biased report. I believe those who steered the narrative of the DODIG report did so not for historical documentation or to enhance future military response capability, but to protect and advance individuals who sought to shield themselves from responsibility, to overly enhance their role and perceive significance in a critical moment in the history of our nation's democracy. In truth, their actions, no matter how innocent they believe them to be, have led to an awful mark on our military and shown an incredible lack of respect for the service of the men and women who serve in the DC National Guard before, during, and after January 6th of 2021. Trust in our Army's most senior leadership was lost. Their actions and comments have highlighted the Army staff and the Secretary of the Army's lack of knowledge and understanding of the DC National Guard, its authorities, and capabilities. Prior to the protests following the murder of George Floyd in May of 2020, I do not believe any of them understood just how unique the DC National Guard is, and the responsibility that is delegated from the President to the Secretary of Defense and further delegated to the Secretary of the Army. I believe it is this lack of understanding that led to the significant delays in the military response on January 6th. I will not sit here today and say if we had been given authority to immediately respond when Chief Sun, the chief of the Capitol Police, made that first frantic call for support at 1:49 p.m., that we would have prevented the breach of the Capitol. What I can tell you with absolute certainty is that we had a force equipped and ready to respond. And despite the inaccuracies of the DODIG report, we had a plan and would have liked the opportunity to try. Instead, we waited for hours, less than 2 miles east of the Capitol, knowing our Capitol had been breached and not understanding why we had not received the authorization to respond. I cannot tell you the number of times someone has asked me, where were you? Where was the National Guard? Or how can you call yourselves Capitol Guardians? There's no easy response to those questions, and the truth is, we were there and we were ready. We just weren't authorized to respond, and that is difficult to explain. The soldiers and airmen of the DC National Guard deserve better. They deserve to be recognized for their sacrifices over a prolonged period of civil unrest from May of 2020 to May of 2021. I look forward to your questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. I now recognize Colonel Earl Matthews for 5 minutes.
Chairman Loudermilk, Ranking Member Torres, members of the subcommittee, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Earl Matthews, and I'm a colonel in the United States Army Reserve. I'm in the 25th year of my military service. I love our Army, and I'm committed to our Army values. I'm here today because two I'm here today because two senior general officers of the United States Army, General Charles A. Flynn and Lieutenant General Walter E. Pyatt, have acted contrary to those values. Generals Pyatt and Flynn have lied to Congress, to federal investigators, and to the American people about why it took so long for the District of Columbia National Guard to deploy to the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Their distortions contributed to a deeply and fundamentally flawed Department of Defense Inspector General investigation and to deficiencies in other.
This was the ultimate survival food of our forefathers, cooled and sewn into bison hide bags weighing 90 pounds.
Official inquiries. On January 6, 2021, I was on duty and present during numerous conversations, video conferences, and phone calls leading up to, during, and after the riot, which was engulfing the Capitol. When I say these general officers lied, I do not do so lightly or cavalierly. I speak from personal knowledge, having interacted with them on January 6th in my official military capacity. Unfortunately, some senior officials within the Department of the Army and the Department of Defense have sought to protect or to promote Generals Flynn and Pyatt. These senior civilian officials have excused, condoned, or overlooked the misconduct of these officers. As a former acting general counsel of the Department of the Army and its chief legal officer, I take these matters seriously, even if others don't. I'm glad the subcommittee has an open mind and is committed to the dogged search for the truth. In my formal statement, which I provided to the committee in advance of today's hearing, I detailed General Pyatt's and General Flynn's intentional misrepresentations to the Congress and to federal investigators. During today's hearing, I hope to discuss with you how they lied, where they lied, and in my opinion, why they lied. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel Matthews. I now recognize Brigadier General Aaron Dean for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, members of the subcommittee. Good morning, I'm Brigadier General retired Aaron Dean. Let history record this moment as I, in my capacity as the second in command of the District of Columbia National Guard, entrusted with the sacred duty to advise and assist the commanding general on matters of operational significance concerning the deployment of the District of Columbia National Guard on January 6, 2021. Address the grave assertions and inaccuracies contained in the Inspector General's report, DOD-IG 2022-039. I believe it is my duty and moral obligation to stand before you today and illuminate the truth. I stand resolute, bearing witness to the unwavering readiness and unparalleled dedication of the service members of the District of Columbia National Guard. I will answer questions honestly, as witnessed through the lens of my 34-year career in the District of Columbia National Guard. I rebuff in the strongest terms the insidious insinuation that the District of Columbia National Guard faltered in its duty, that it languished in apathy or incompetence when called upon to safeguard the sanctum of democracy. Today, I will tell the truth to the best of my recollection, unblemished by falsehoods, and in doing so, exonerate the honor of the brave soldiers and airmen who stood unwavering in the defense of our nation. May my testimony serve as a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who answered the call of duty on that historic day. Thank you.
Thank you, General Dean. Now recognize Captain Timothy Nick for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, my name is Timothy Nick, and I'm a captain in the Army National Guard. I'm here today to aid the subcommittee in resolving factual errors in the official record of what happened on January 6, 2021, specifically regarding the alleged District of Columbia National Guard delayed response caused by critical presidentially appointed, Senate-confirmed Pentagon senior officials. I was concerned by the events that unfolded that day on the United States Capitol. As a federal officer of the United States Secret Service and a former state trooper with the Florida Highway Patrol, my heart goes out to all law enforcement officers, sisters and brothers that held the line that day to restore public order to the chaos. I'm here today with my counsels, Lachlan McKillen and Dan Meyer of law firm Tully Rickney. The firm has advised me, beginning with my role as a confidential source to the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. When my confidentiality was breached, it was Dan who intervened to ensure I was protected as a military whistleblower. First, I want to explain my role on January 6th. I was assigned as aide-de-camp, the personal assistant to Major General William Walker, the commanding general of the DC National Guard. It was my only second day on the job. Please focus on alleged facts found in the November 16th, 2021 Department of Defense Inspector General's multidisciplinary review into the DC National Guard response and Department of Defense's role that day. I can say unequivocally that the Inspector General's review is riddled with inaccuracies, misstatements, and perhaps false flags and narratives regarding how critical Pentagon senior officials responded when our republic was under great stress. For instance, during a conference call at 2:31 p.m. with members of United States Army, U.S. Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police Department, District of Columbia Government, and U.S. Secret Service Uniform Division, the U.S. Army's Lieutenant General Walter Pyatt, Director of Army Staff, and the Army's Lieutenant General Charles Flynn, Director of Chief of Staff of Operations, were on the call. Also was Colonel John Lubis, Executive Officer to the Secretary of the Army. The Army falsely denied that General Flynn was ever on the call. This is false and material on its face. Lieutenant Flynn was on the call and even participated in discussions. The Defense Inspector's review also rounds language, papering over the fact that Lieutenant General Pyatt and Lieutenant General Flynn, while on the call, discussed how they did not like the optics. That is a direct quote. And they stated it would be in their best military advice to recommend to the Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy, to deny the request from Command General William Walker to deploy the DC National Guard and aid U.S. Capitol Police in restoration of order, liberty on Capitol Hill. In addition, former Secretary of the Army Ryan McCarthy claims he was on a 2:31 p.m. call and spoke on that call. This is false, unless he was in the room shadowing the call and he did not speak nor identify himself. He was not on the call. He was en route to Washington, D.C. Regional Office at the Federal Bureau of Investigation to support that agency's concept of operations plan for January 6th. He went on to claim that he called and spoke to Major General Walker at least twice, ordering the deployment of the DC National Guard. This is also false. At no time did General Walker take any calls, nor did we ever hear from the Secretary on any of the ongoing conference calls or the secure video teleconferencing throughout the day. This I know because I was with the Command General the entire time recording events. Throughout the day, Major General Walker told by staff officers to stand by with respect to deploying to the Capitol Hill. Only at 5:09 p.m. in the early evening, which I wrote down in my wheel book, was the DC Guard given order to deploy and move to the Capitol to assist Capitol Police. We arrived too late. One American lay dead with other sisters and brothers injured, including federal and local law enforcement officers. We were ready and standing by. I know if we were able to deploy immediately when General Walker made the request, the National Guard could have helped end civil disturbance and restored public order quickly. The Army National Guard motto is always ready, always there. The DC National Guard was ready to help and assist Capitol Police, but we were not allowed to do our job due to paralyzed decision-making by Acting Secretary of Defense Chris Miller and Secretary of the Army Ryan McCarthy. This led to federal leadership in the Pentagon. This led to a crisis in federal leadership at the Pentagon and delayed the DC response by 3 hours and 19 minutes. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and articulate the facts as they happened. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Captain. And as we begin our question session, I want to reemphasize how much we appreciate all of you coming forward. I know as a veteran of the Armed Forces myself, this takes an incredible amount of courage to come forward and tell the truth. We'll now move into the questions session, and I begin to. Just a reminder that make sure the microphones are very close to you during this time. I now recognize the gentleman for Virginia, Mr. Griffith, for 5 minutes.
We have a sergeant major, a colonel, a brigadier general, and a captain. Your testimony is compelling. Thank you. Now to the questions. On January 6, 2021, were each of you gentlemen with Major General William Walker from 1:49 p.m. through 5:55 p.m., yes or no?
Yes.
I was.
Yes.
Yes.
For anyone struggling with high blood sugar, do not drink cold water. Did you know type 2 diabetes?
The Department of Defense Inspector General report, DODIG report, alleges that the Secretary of Army contacted Major General Walker multiple times on January 6 during that time frame. Some allegations are 2 calls, some are 3, but the allegations would be, or the assertions would be, 3:04 p.m., 4:35 p.m., and finally at 5 p.m. Do any of you recall any one of those calls taking place?
Negative, sir. Can I amplify that though?
Yes, sir.
So, by way of background, I was a political appointee in the Trump administration. I was a senior political appointee. I was also a guard. I was also in the Army Reserve and National Guard. Now, in June of 2017, I was appointed to acting general counsel of the Department of the Army. The next month, Ryan McCarthy was appointed acting Secretary of the Army. He'd been confirmed as Undersecretary of the Army. So Ryan McCarthy was my colleague. He was my friend. I told the committee he was a good Secretary of the Army. I had a great deal of affection for Ryan McCarthy. I know he did for me. So I'm not here to badmouth Ryan McCarthy, but I've got to set the record straight.
Yes,
sir. In my memo, I called Pye and Flynn liars. I never called McCarthy a liar for 2 reasons. One, it wasn't clear to me that he was saying some of the things they said he said. I mean, it appeared to me that some of the things they said he said were said by others who were trying to really protect themselves. The other thing was, he was my friend. You just don't turn it off. You don't call your friend a liar. So, but at 2:30, at 2:31, at the 2:30, they said that he was on a call with General Walker, and he told him to move the QRF to the Armory. I mean, that did not happen. Ryan McCarthy didn't speak on that call. And we know this because that call was on a conference bridge. It was a DC government conference bridge. Now, the DODIG incorrectly states that McCarthy requested the call. I helped facilitate that call. General Walker was on a call with Dr. Rodriguez, who was the Homeland Security Advisor for Mayor Bowser. Mayor Bowser was on a call. Chief Son was on a call. Chief Conte was on a call. All of us at this dais were all on a call. Ryan McCarthy never spoke on that call. I'm a person who was his friend, who knew his voice quite well. If he had said anything, I would say that. We were told he was unavailable. I called his executive officer to ask to speak to him, and we were told he was unavailable. General Walter Pyatt and General Charles Flynn were on the call. Subsequently, Flynn denies he was even involved in the call. For what reason, I really don't know. He did so under oath, and Command Sergeant Major Brooks, myself, and Lieutenant Nick were all interviewed by the Select Committee. We told them that. To me, this is material because Flynn denied under oath twice to the House Oversight Committee and to the Select Committee that he was even participated in the call. That goes to his integrity, to his credibility.
All right,
I'm
let me underline this. Colonel, you are also an attorney.
Yes, sir.
You got your degree from Harvard Law School.
Yes, sir. I got a mortgage in Great Falls, Virginia. I have no reason to be up here lying because I don't want to go to federal prison.
And you understand that you are, if you lie to Congress, Title 18-1001 makes that a crime. Is that correct?
Unquestionably, sir.
And you also understand that as a member of the legal establishment, that if you were to lie under oath, your license to practice law, no matter the fact that you have a JD from Harvard, could be in jeopardy. Is that correct?
No question, sir. And sir, I want to point out.
Yes, sir.
I spoke to the Select Committee. I was not under oath, but it doesn't matter because you don't have to be under oath. If you lie to Congress, it's still a federal crime.
Yes,
and
sir.
I'm fully aware of that. And I submitted a document stating that these men were liars, and I stand by it 100%. And it's to stand on my army that they got away with it. And no one said anything about it. And they even sent Pye's name to the President of the United States to have him promoted. He was a liar. And all of us can attest to that.
And you want the truth to come out.
No question about it, sir.
Good, bad, or ugly, correct?
Exactly.
Anybody here want anything but the truth? Any of the 4 witnesses want anything but the truth to come out?
No, sir.
Good, bad, or ugly. Doesn't matter. No matter what side you're on. Is that correct? I heard a yes, a no, sir.
Yes,
you
sir.
want the truth?
Yes, sir. Nothing but the truth. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Colonel Matthews, Brigadier General?
That's correct.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know. I got lots of other questions to ask, but I appreciate you jumping in and clearly with your heartfelt emotions telling us that things weren't exactly true, and that, in fairness, the January 6th committee was not told the truth. Is that correct, Colonel?
Well, so they were not told the truth, but I think they knew that though, and they disregarded that. And this is what I mean. So General Flynn testified before the House Oversight Committee on June 15th, 2021. During his opening statement and during his questioning, he stated explicitly that he was not on that phone call. He made no statements on that call. Subsequently, he was interviewed by the January 6th committee, and he also stated he was directly asked by the senior investigative counsel, "Did you make any statements on that call?" He says he did not. He was not on the call, he says. Now, that is perjury, in my opinion. I mean, I'm a lawyer, but it's for court to decide. But to me, that's perjury. But the important point is, later I raised that. I was interviewed by the Select Committee. In
Unfortunately,
December.
my time is up, but hopefully you'll get another opportunity to talk about it. All right, I apologize. My time is up. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields and now recognize the subcommittee's ranking member, Ms. Torres, for 5 minutes.
Colonel Matthews, I spent more than 17 years as 911 dispatcher. I worked through some very difficult times in the city of LA, Rodney King riots, the verdicts. On 9/11, I was tasked with putting together mobile field force units to dispatch to critical locations to ensure that those would not be attacked. So I know what an EOC is supposed to look like. I know what orders to follow during certain types of emergency. I was prepared with a manual that was provided to me, things that we have practiced time and time and time again. During an emergency, you agree that it is vital that we have a quick response and a unified coordination that has clear communications, correct?
No question.
I was struck by your written testimony when you said the DC National Guard was delayed because Millie McCarthy and McConville believed that the President of the United States might deploy the National Guard improperly on that day and had taken measures to prevent this. This must have been incredibly frustrating for you and for your colleagues in the Guard. Why do you think senior military leaders believe the President of the United States might employ the National Guard improperly on January 6th? Was it based on their words, actions, or both?
I think that I think that belief was irrational because I don't believe the president ever gave any of them an unlawful order.
Okay,
He gave none of them an unlawful order.
Secretary
He appointed all of them to high office.
Ryan
Appointed them all to
McCarthy
high office, and
testified that on January 6th Select Committee, that at one point he was walking down the Pentagon hallways, and one of the most seasoned reporters asked him whether the Army was planning to seize ballot boxes. Do you know if ideas like the president seizing ballot boxes was something Secretary McCarthy was considering when making decisions about deploying the Guard on January 6th?
I think it was, but I think it was not a rational belief. I think
Okay.
so. Secretary McCarthy
Was
says
there widespread fear within the Department of Defense about the president using the military or
No.
other levers of the state to impact the election around the time of the 2020 election?
no. So it was not a widespread fear. It was a fear among a clique of officers led by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who talked about a so-called Reichstag moment.
Okay,
And,
well, let me
who-
tell you, the New York Times reported in January 2022 that President Trump actually directed his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, to ask the Department of Homeland Security to see if it could legally take control of voting machines in key swing states. I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to enter this New York Times article entitled "Trump Had Role in Weighing Proposals to Seize Voting Machines" into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Command Sergeant Major Brooks, you served in the Army and Army National Guard for 29 years. You spent the months after January 6th right here on this Capitol Hill protecting the citadel of democracy. I understand that for the entire time that you were deployed, you slept in your office, with the exception of maybe 1 week over the course of months. You clearly are a patriot who loves our country. How did you feel watching the Capitol get overrun, knowing that you were almost walking distance away, but not permitted to come assist law enforcement in defending it?
It was very disheartening to see. I believe it was something that, I think any of us who serve in the military was something that we didn't think we would see in our lifetime. It was very frustrating to know that we had the capability and the personnel and unable to respond.
Thank you.
It's hard to describe.
Brigadier General Aaron Dean, what is the basis and rationale on which the Department of Defense and DC National Guard rely in determining the equipment, tactics, techniques, and procedures that the Guard could use to respond to escalations in the protests on January 6th? Was this atypical?
I don't think it wasn't atypical.
We right now are just months away from the 2024 election, and the man who incited the 2020 insurrection is on the ballot again. What corrective actions has the National Guard Bureau of Department of Defense taken to ensure the National Guard can plan, coordinate, and execute command and control in response to threats in the national capital region?
I can only really talk about the District of Columbia National Guard and its preparation, especially around January 6th. We match capability with request. So if there's a request, we match the capability that we have. And we had riot control capability on that day to provide services for the Capitol.
So you would say that over the last 4 years, the smoke has been cleared and everyone is clear on how to respond, and politics will not take priority over necessity.
I can say that the District of Columbia National Guard is always ready to respond.
Thank you, sir.
And was ready even before that date.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Congressman D'Esposito of New York. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question for everyone. We could start and just go down the line. Did you testify in front of the January 6th Select Committee?
No, I received a phone call.
You say testified. I had an informal interview with the.
Right, but it was
You can move
not
the mic
archived,
closer.
correct?
I'm sorry, second.
If you could move the mic closer, please. We'll give you a couple extra seconds.
So the answer, Command Sergeant, was no?
No.
Colonel, you were interviewed but never in front of the committee?
Correct.
Brigadier General?
No.
Captain?
Informally interviewed, but never in front of the committee.
Okay, got it. So as the chairman mentioned in his opening remarks, we're here today to not only correct the record, but also make sure that we are better prepared today than we were, right? We want to be better prepared as a nation, as an agency. We want to be better prepared for the next, God forbid, incident than we were that day, not really to focus on President Trump. That's not really what we're here for today. So Captain Nick, in your opening testimony, or the one submitted to the committee, you said that at about 2:30 conference call, and I quote, Lieutenant General Piat and Lieutenant General Flynn, while on the call, discussed how they did not like the optics. They stated it would be in their best military advice to recommend to the Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy, to deny the request from Command General William Walker to deploy the DC National Guard and aid the United States Capitol Police in the restoration of ordered liberty, or as some called on this committee, democracy, on Capitol Hill. Major Brooks, during the bipartisan transcribed interview the subcommittee conducted in March 2024, you were asked if you recall hearing the word optics on your 2:30 p.m. phone call. You responded, yes, and I quote, General Flynn and General Piat both made numerous comments about the optics of having the Guard on the Capitol and how they would much prefer that the Guard relieve MPD officers elsewhere in the city so that they could respond to the Capitol, close quote. For everyone, and we'll start with Command Sergeant Major Brooks, why would these military experts want to send the National Guard to relieve MPD officers elsewhere after the Capitol was breached at 2:12 p.m.?
In my opinion, it was a senseless recommendation. The logistics and the amount of time it would have taken to replace individual MPD officers across the city would have taken way too much time, and it would have been further delayed.
I think the key term there is senseless. Colonel.
So their whole attitude was that this mission was for law enforcement. They never wanted DC Guard to be in the streets in the first place. They didn't ever want to approve the 350. They thought this was a law enforcement mission. They believed it would have required 100,000 demonstrators before the DC Guard was necessary, and that was the Army's thinking. So they wanted, and they also said they wanted no involvement in the politicization of the, or no involvement in the electoral certification process. They wanted no DOD role there. So that was their attitude. So we were not allowed to be east of 9th Street. So, which is where the Capitol is. We're not, we had to have the Secretary of the Army's approval to move 3 unarmed guardsmen 1 block.
Right. So sounds like baseless decisions. Brigadier General.
So I did hear the word optics, and they did use it, especially specifically General Pyatt, I know, said optics. And his concern was he did not want soldiers or airmen on the Capitol grounds with the Capitol in the background. And so they were giving every other reason why we should be around the Capitol, away from the Capitol, and not responding to the Capitol. And part of what I believe is I believe that they're unfamiliar with our true capabilities and what we're really designed to do as the National Guard.
Can you say that again for everyone to hear?
I think they're unfamiliar with our true capabilities and what we're designed to do as the National Guard under Title 32.
Precisely. Captain.
I did hear the word optics also, and General Pyatt and General Flynn did say it wasn't in their best military advice to recommend to the Secretary at this time to approve that request.
And I only have 30 seconds, but I would just like to go down the line once again and answer this question. Was it clear at the time that the #1 priority was to restore order or to protect the safety of members of Congress, staff, or visitors here at the Capitol complex? Captain.
Absolutely.
No, that was not.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
it was clear that we needed to be at the Capitol at that time.
Right. You needed to be, but was that their #1 priority?
No, it was not.
Brigadier General.
Their #1 priority was to make the police respond and not the National Guard.
Colonel.
Absolutely not, Congressman.
It was not their priority, sir.
Thank you. I think it's clear. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Mr. Morelli for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start my question, and I apologize, I only have 5 minutes, so I'll try to get through some of this quickly. But first of all, appreciate very much your frustration. This was your job to defend the Capitol, and for the reasons both of the hearing and the conversation, you weren't called on to do that. So obviously it's palpable how strongly you feel about this missed opportunity to defend us, and I appreciate that, and I don't think there's any disagreement here. You should have been here much sooner, and I certainly don't know that anyone argues that it was your fault that happened. I am a little shocked. Mr. D'Esposito said, we're not here to talk about President Trump. To me, that's a little like asking Mrs. Lincoln, other than the incident, how did you like the play? The truth is the commander-in-chief could have ordered the National Guard. And as I said earlier, and frankly, I think Mr. Griffiths said, and I'll have to go back and look at the record, that the president ordered the troops out on January 6th. There's no evidence anywhere that I've heard of other than him saying it. There's literally no evidence of logs from the White House. There's no evidence anywhere that the president did that. And frankly, look, I don't know much about this. I'm a civilian. If I were the president of the United States, as soon as the breach happened, as soon as there was any measure of violence at the Capitol, I would have assembled people in the Situation Room, and I don't care about this. If the Secretary of Defense was there, the Secretary of the Army was there. I'm the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. And so I guess I'd begin, General Dean, if an order came from the White House, from the president, that deployed the National Guard, would that order have been questioned by anyone?
But I would answer it this way. I would say that order was delegated. The responsibility of the response from the commanding general was written in a written document to him that basically gave him parameters on what he could do and what he couldn't do.
So
Now,
I
could the
appreciate
president-
that. I appreciate that. But I don't believe the delegation of authority exempts the higher authority. If a call came from the president or the White House that the president wants this deployed, if the Secretary of Defense were somewhere, the Secretary of Army were somewhere else, would you have ignored that order?
No, we wouldn't have.
No,
not at all.
That's look, and I don't want to draw you into it. I'm just saying those who want to absolve the higher levels of command. Likewise, if the Secretary of Army had not acted, but the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Miller, had called, and his office had called General Walker and said, deploy the National Guard immediately, would anyone have questioned that order?
No, we wouldn't. I'll speak from my perspective. We wouldn't have questioned it, but we would have wanted it coordinated based on the document that was sent by the Secretary of the Army.
So not to interrupt you, you would have sought a manner to verify and to make sure that that was legally the appropriate process, but you would have acted on it immediately, no?
I think the whole thing was there would have been a conversation, right?
Yeah.
There was this talk about they needed a con-op, right? A concept of operations.
Yeah.
Well, that's a discussion. In a crisis, that's a discussion.
I agree.
And so with that, there would have been a discussion about the deployment of the National Guard with any order given by any senior official.
Yeah, and I guess I get, and this isn't necessarily a question, but what I hear is a lot of confusion between the White House, the Department of Defense, the Secretary of the Army and his office. I don't know what happened. I guess there's varying accounts. And what I think each of you is here to testify is that the order didn't come down.
Congressman, may I speak to that, please, sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
So chain of command runs from the president to the Secretary of Defense to Secretary of the Army to General Walker. Now, the Secretary of Defense authorized the DC National Guard to deploy at 3 o'clock. The DC Guard was able to deploy at 3 o'clock.
Yes.
It had the capability, readiness to go on the street at 3 o'clock. But the order didn't come from the Secretary of the Army. So that was the
No, I understand.
the bottleneck there. The president would follow the chain of command. So typically the president, and I must.
No,
remind-
I would say this, excuse me, I'm going to reclaim my time, I apologize. Is that if I were the President of the United States and had ordered it, if that were true, there's no evidence that happened, but let's say it had been ordered, and then 20 minutes goes by and nothing's happening, I'll be on the phone again to my secretaries, and I'd be on the phone to General Walker and say, what's going on? I've ordered you out, move out. And I, with all due respect, conversation should have happened. I don't know if it did or did not, but.
So Congressman, I think that, if the president would have called the Secretary of the Army, the Secretary of the Army would have said, we're moving as fast as we can. We need to be deliberate. We need to know more information. That's what the Secretary of the Army said in sworn testimony.
But that's not what happened. He didn't say that in his testimony.
He did say that in his testimony, sir.
No, he didn't. He didn't say the President of the United States ordered him to do anything.
No, he said that if the president would have called, he said it would not have made a difference. The president's call would not have made a difference. Secretary McCarthy.
I disagree. Well,
Secretary McCarthy, I think you're right also.
Respectfully, sir, let me reclaim my time. In fact, my time is over. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I don't disagree. This is an important conversation. I don't think it's one for our committee. I think the Armed Services Committee ought to be holding this. And there is a question to make sure that come January 2025, we better be damn sure we have communication that is clear, compelling, and chain of command. But I do think there's no way to absolve responsibility of the president, the Secretary of Defense, or the Secretary of the Army. You may dispute what happened, and I think that's fair, but something should have happened that triggered the deployment of the National Guard sooner so that you could have done your jobs and we wouldn't be having this hearing this morning. So with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I agree with him on his last statement that we need to be prepared for the next time that we have January 6th come up, which is in the law. I would also correct the record. I did say the president, the gentleman is correct. That's not in the evidence. The president had previously given Christopher Miller the authority to act, as he stated in his testimony, which was previously submitted into the record. And Christopher Miller is the one who gave the order that did not get followed, apparently, by the Secretary of Army. That being said, I now recognize Dr. Murphy for his 5 minutes of question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize if I'm a little out of breath. It's just being old. Thank you all for coming forward. It takes absolute courage, absolute courage. Every damn meeting we have now has Trump derangement syndrome talking to it. This was a dereliction of duty by the Secretary of the Army, who refused, by the way, to come before this committee because he knew his culpability. He knew that he lied and he was derelict in the duty. And I appreciate from the bottom of my heart you guys standing up for the United States of America. You took an oath to it, as did the Secretary, and you're keeping your oath. So I deeply appreciate it at your own personal cost, because we know the weaponization of this government is occurring at an exponential rate. And it's just it is just proof in the pudding that this is what we're dealing with. I swear, why do we not have bipartisan support in getting to the bottom of this is beyond me. It's everything about Trump. Captain Nick, the summer before in 2020, when there was an absolute disaster in this country where riots and burning of federal buildings occur, we saw billions of dollars, multiple deaths occur. Speaker Pelosi, I believe, is culpable with part of this in allowing this, paving the way for the terrible thing to happen on January 6th, to just dismiss America's memory of what happened the summer before. In contrast, the protests at Capitol on January 6th, which we know were all wrong, there was no hesitation in creating a politicized community. And we had a former Republican who saw it as a personal grind to go after President Trump, basically not allowing evidence to come before the committee. It's been more than 3 years, and members of the DC National Guard are coming forward with your oath to provide clarity. I'll just ask Captain Nick, in your testimony, you mentioned you were a confidential source for the Select Committee. In addition, you go on to state, my confidentiality was breached to the national media. Would you mind expanding upon that?
Yes, sir. First, I'd like to correct the record from a previous statement from your colleague. When he asked a question about Pentagon officials and their desire to send troops, I said absolutely. I meant they did not at the time want to send troops to the Capitol, just for clarification. I was informally after January 6th, at some time after, I was informally interviewed by the Select Committee on January 6th. I gave informal testimony and hired counsel from Tully Rickney, Dan Meyer, who's also behind me. After giving my written notes and informal testimony, a couple weeks later, I was contacted by Political from a news outlet, from a writer requesting comment on my handwritten notes they got a copy of. I then contacted Dan, who then contacted the Select Committee to resolve that. But it had to be leaked at some point from probably the Select Committee, because that's the only people I talked to and gave my notes to.
It is obviously evident with anybody with an objective eye that the committee was put forth to tell one thing. If that committee had gone in front of anything in a legal department, you would have cross-examination, other witnesses, et cetera. We never saw any of that to get to the actual truth, which is what all Americans, whether you're which party or not, should believe in doing. Period. I just want to reiterate something. This is actually, I guess, to Colonel Matthews and General Dean. Turning to the matter of security, Secretary of the Army and McCarthy have said the DC National Guard was not prepared for immediate deployment. Do you agree with that statement?
That statement is false. We were prepared in many ways. We even had backup plans. We call them branches and sequels, right? So not only did we have a force that was at Andrews Air Force Base that was training and doing civil disturbance that weekend, prepared to deploy on that day, that was ready to deploy on that day, we also had traffic control points that were at MPD, and those members had riot control gear in the trunk, not visible to the public, but for their self-protection, in case MPD had to respond, they had the appropriate gear to provide civil disturbance, riot control efforts if needed. And so we had the capability, we had the planning, we had the know-how. So the question that I have is, so out of all the events, out of all the inaugurations the District of Columbia National Guard supported, out of all the NATO summits, out of all the IMF protests that we've had, the summer 2020, COVID, we were not able to respond to this. We're incapable. That's categorically false.
I find it just, my time is short, but I just find it a slap in the face to all the good men and women who serve in our armed forces to say you're not prepared. A slap in the face. And because this guy wanted to save his butt with the hope of getting in the Biden administration, that's point blank what happened. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back after consultation with Ms. Torres. We've agreed to do a second round of questioning, and I would recognize Ms. Torres for her additional 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you. The claim that somehow the Select Committee didn't investigate the National Guard response to the security failures at the Capitol on January 6th is inconsistent with the facts. As I mentioned, the Select Committee interviewed 24 individuals and reviewed 37,000 pages of documents related to the National Guard on January 6th. Their response, and 46 of those pages are in the final report that was issued. If you search the transcripts of those interviews held with these witnesses ahead of this hearing, you'll see the significant number of questions used for testimony from the Select Committee as their foundation. Just because there wasn't a court reporter doesn't mean that it didn't happen. As I told you in the back room, I was in the balcony while all of this was unfolding. I was also witness to an assault on an officer where the door swung open on balcony that I was sitting. But just because they didn't interview me for that incident doesn't mean that any of those investigations did not happen. But let me just remind everyone, about what the president was putting out on social media during that time. At 2:24 p.m., the president tweeted out regarding Vice President Pence not having the courage to do the wrong thing that he wanted him to do. At 3:13, the president had issued another statement saying, I'm asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful, no violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order, respect the law, and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. He didn't tell people to go home. He didn't tell them to go home. It took many of his own closest allies to get him to this point. President didn't want the violence against the police or against members of Congress or against his own vice president to stop. The truth is he wanted the violence to continue until he could take custody and continue to keep custody of his position. At 4:17, he finally posts a video that contained many lies about the election, but finally encourages people to go home. And that's when they finally started home. Those are the real facts of what happened on that day. So in addition to under Democratic leadership, and I know that you want to continue to blame Democrats for what happened on that day, but Democrats did not tell the mob, the angry mob that was armed, to go to the Capitol. Democrats are not responsible for that. The request, about this January 6th attack we have gone back and forth as to who was ordered to do what. That information is very clear. There were no clear directions, because if there were clear directions, everyone would have moved in unison. Everybody would have been together, putting together those plans that you said already exist. So, Colonel Matthews, you seem to want to respond. Please go ahead.
Well, ma'am, I just, the committee, so the committee interviewed, again, Command Sergeant Major Brooks, myself, and Lieutenant Nick. We all told them that there are issues with the credibility of several witnesses, that people were not been responding honestly and accurately as part of the investigation, and that was disregarded. And that goes to the credibility of what they were telling the committee. Like, for instance, the committee says, the select committee stated in its findings that our QRF, there was debatable what its purpose was. There's no debate about that. It was a civil disturbance response force. It was designed to respond to a riot. But General
I think you're missing the point. There would have been no riot. There would have been no riot had the President of the United States not set up the stage and order people and told them that he would join them at the U.S. Capitol. There had been no galley that was erected to hang the vice president if the president had not want them to stop us from certifying the election. You're missing the point of all of what happened 6 months prior to January 6th, the chaos that was happening within the branches of the military that are sworn to never get involved in domestic affairs. I yield back.
The Gentle Lady yields. I apologize for a brief absence. I have another committee that a bill got called up right at the worst time that I had to go present. But I think a couple of points of clarification. The Capitol breach began well before the people at the White House made it down to the Capitol. The gallows were actually erected at 6 o'clock in the morning, and no one knew exactly what Mike Pence was going to do until about 1:30 in the afternoon. These are just some of the questions of the narrative that came out from the January 6th report, which is this much. This is how much is discussed about the DC National Guard. The primary objective of the Select Committee was to investigate the security failure at the U.S. Capitol, because we have to identify the failures before we can fix things. There was an entire team, the blue team, who was commissioned with doing that. I challenge anyone to look in here and find anything of substance from the blue team whatsoever. So this is why it's important that we do the oversight that is the job of Congress, and specifically the subcommittee, to look into what happened. This is clearly within the security failure of the Capitol. This should not be political. This should not be biased in one way or the other. Regardless of who was coming to the Capitol, regardless of who broke into the Capitol, that should have never happened. There should have been no breach of this Capitol. The resources are here. And the idea that the New Jersey National Guard would get here before our own National Guardsmen, whose job is to, as Colonel Matthews said, riot control, traffic control. This is their job, to come in and help defend this Capitol. And so, with that, I do have a few questions here. The DOD IG report alleges that DOD officials did not delay or obstruct a response to the Capitol. Sergeant Major Brooks, I'll start with you. Do you believe that the deployment of the DC National Guard was delayed?
Yes.
Who do you believe delayed it?
Secretary McCarthy and senior officials in the Army staff.
Okay. Why do you believe that they delayed it?
I believe their misunderstanding of the capabilities of DC National Guard and the seriousness of the situation, to be honestly, I have no idea why we never received that order. All I know is that they were more concerned with what it would look like with soldiers with the Capitol in the background than protecting the Capitol of the United States.
Colonel Matthews, same question for you. Do you believe that deployment of the DC National Guard was delayed?
Yes, sir. I believe that it was a result of an overcautious, reluctant, hesitant, facilitating leadership. And I think they were concerned about the optics, the political optics of a military presence here. And I don't think they trusted the commander in chief. And I think that was because of our senior ranking military officer who was making disparaging remarks about the president to them. You got to remember, the people who ran the Army are very close associates of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They owed this position. They owed their positions to him, and he was not. I mean, there are books about how Chairman Milley was impeding the ability of the president. So I think that was an issue there, sir.
So just to clarify, you think that there was a delay that was calculated for one reason or the other, but you're not indicating that there was a nefarious purpose in that. Just so we don't walk out of here with conspiracy theories that the DOD wanted the Capitol to fail. I just want to make sure that's not where you're going with that.
I'm not going with that, sir. I'm saying that the conditions were set by this talk of a coup, of a Reichstag moment. I mean, the idea that I mean. Let me be frank about it. A bunch of black kids in the DC Guard are going to usurp the election for Trump. It's crazy, but that's what they were talking about. I mean, and it's crazy talk, and it was out there, and it's in books. I mean, Milley's talked about it.
Why are doctors using this weird lamp to eliminate mold from their clinics?
And in 15 minutes, you know.
Well, I've got you, Colonel Matthews. Do you believe the DOD-IG report accurately reflects the events of January 6, 2021?
That DOD-IG report is replete with incorrect information, false information. Even the select committee's report has shown that. And can I give you a couple of examples, please?
Sure.
It says at 1635, Ryan McCarthy called General Walker and directed him to go to the Capitol. Now, McCarthy, if you read his transcript from the select committee, he said he never did that. He was getting ready for a news conference. He was taking notes and writing and so preparing for a televised news conference. And he overheard Brigadier General Neeed direct General Walker to go, but General Neeed says he never told General Walker to go. He never gave a go order. So they do like this. They point in each other's directions and say but the DOD-IG puts it in. And then they claim that they had to call Walker again at 1700, like 25 minutes later, and direct him to go. That's an absolute falsehood. McCarthy was in a televised press conference. Mr. Storch, the DOD Inspector General, has an obligation to correct the record where does he go? Where does General Walker go to get his reputation back? I mean, you smeared this man by anonymous sources, and we're talking about general officers in the Army who were bitter because of Walker's testimony in March before the Senate. They didn't like that, and they wanted to get General Pyatt promoted to general. And so they wanted to take down Walker. Even General Milley engages in that. General Milley engages in that, and if you read his transcript, sir, from the select committee, he implies Walker was lying or exaggerating. And everything General Milley says in his transcribed interview from the committee is incorrect, and the committee staff had to know it.
So let me just clarify something here. General Walker did testify under oath to the select committee. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, he did.
The implication of the DOD-IG report is that General Walker falsely testified. Is that fair?
To the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee and to the Senate Rules Committee. He testified in March. In March of 2021, the DOD-IG report came out in November 2021, and the implication was that he was not truthful in his testimony.
So,
and this is a sitting officer of the Congress of the United States appointed by Speaker Pelosi, a sworn career federal law enforcement executive in the Major General of the United States Army. Okay. They were implying that he committed outright perjury on live television.
So,
and I took exception to that. I wrote my memo, sir. I wasn't working for General Walker. I had nothing to gain from that, but it was the right thing to do. This man was responsible for all of your personal safety. He was smeared by it, and
okay. Let me reclaim my time. There's other questions I need to get to, but I just wanted to make sure that you understand that the implications of the DOD-IG report is that General Walker falsified testimony or was not truthful. Would you believe that he would be selected to be the head security officer of the House of Representatives by Nancy Pelosi if it was known that he had lied under oath? Okay, I just want to make sure we're talking about someone who was selected by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to be the sergeant at arms here. I'm just getting to the point. This is a bipartisan issue that we're talking about here. Let me move on real quickly. Captain Nick, the DOD-IG states they received a copy of contemporaneous notes from Secretary McCarthy's aide-de-camp from January 6, 2021. Did the DOD-IG request a copy of your notes that day?
No.
They did not ask for your notes?
I never spoke to anybody at the Department of Defense IG's office, and they never requested my notes, and they never contacted me.
No. Okay, interesting. I'll do a couple more questions, and we'll continue down the aisle. The DOD-IG report alleges that on June 20, in June of 2020, that June 2020 taught Secretary McCarthy that he could not simply rely on the DC National Guard to figure out the details. General Dean, what do you make of that statement?
I think that he's unfamiliar with what the DC National Guard can actually do and its true capability. So I think he's probably being advised by senior active component officers that have never spent a day in their life in the National Guard. And they're advising him on what the National Guard should or shouldn't do. It's like a surface warfare officer in the Navy talking about a submariner. You're in the same service, but you do different things. Right. And so I think part of the issue is taking military advice from a senior active component officer about National Guard issues pertaining to civil disturbance or domestic response. I think it's out of their wheelhouse. And I think sometimes they can provide inaccurate information. And in doing so, it creates this lack of trust because now you don't know who to believe. You don't know whether to believe the people that are actually supposed to advise you on military matters or the National Guard. But I would propose to you that you need somebody to advise you on Army and Air Force National Guard matters, not just military matters, if you want to get to the truth.
Okay, thank you.